Salutations and welcome to Glitch Bottle, the podcast where we uncork the uncommon in magic, mysticism, and the generally misunderstood. I'm Alexander F., and today on the podcast we are so excited to talk everything tarot with expert esoteric and divination practitioner, Miss Carrie Leitch. Okay, for this episode, get your tarot decks ready, because Carrie has studied several esoteric traditions over the last 25 years, and she has in-depth training in traditional Golden Dawn and Rosicrucian symbolism, and also in-depth experience and expertise in both tarot interpretation and divination. Now, Carrie is also a co-owner, along with her husband, of Doc Solomon's Occult Curios, which makes a variety of blessed and grimoire-specific items for clients, and that's right, she is married to the rambunctious magician and author Aaron Leitch. So we finally know who's been keeping Aaron in line all these years. Anyway, today, Carrie is joining us to talk everything tarot, its inherent power and its uses, its relationship to grimoire magic, and so much more. Now to help us uncork the uncommon, I give you Miss Carrie Leitch. Carrie, thank you so much for taking the time and stopping by the Glitch Bottle podcast today.
Well, thank you for having me on, Alex. I really appreciate the opportunity. I love talking about tarot and magic and teaching classes and stuff, so it's a thrill. I'm glad to be able to be here to share what knowledge I have.
I know our listeners, if they're not familiar, we're going to get into this and talk about your family and, you know, the awesome Doc Solomon's Occult Curios that you have going on. Can you just kind of share a little bit, Carrie, about your background? Like, how did you initially get interested in mysticism, in the tarot, in esotericism in general? Like, how did this whole thing start for you?
Oh, goodness. Long answer or short answer?
Oh, long answer for sure.
I have had a kind of a mystical bent basically ever since I can remember. From the time I was small, I could see spirits and people that had passed on and just kind of things that other people didn't seem to notice. So that kind of led me in a different path than most of my family. As I got older, I got interested in Druidism and then Wicca. I met my first teacher, Oshani Lele, that he goes by now. And he was, at the time, doing Wicca, and he had written some on the Wiccan Kabbalah. At the time, he was also starting to practice Santeria and a few other things amongst the Afro-Caribbean traditions. He influenced me quite a bit. Not long thereafter, I got involved in the Golden Dawn with the Cicero's Chicken Tale with Cicero. That has been probably the greatest influence on me, magically, just in all kinds of ways, because I've been there so long and it is such a part of my life. And that's where most of my tarot knowledge stems from, how I really first started getting into the symbolism of it, what this means, what that means. Why are there planetary and astrological symbols on the traditional cards, things like that. And as I went on, the tarot was, out of a lot of the divination systems, what called me most. I would guess probably because I'm a seer and it is a very visual divination art. So that's kind of where I got started, I guess.
When you were going through that, Carrie, did you feel that you were on a path? Did you kind of get that sense of, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do? Or was it more of just kind of an intuitive feeling out, like, okay, this resonates with me, but I just want to kind of see how this goes, and I want to keep going deeper?
You know, like I said, I kind of just started out with like Druidism, Wicca, that kind of stuff. And when Aaron and I met many years ago, he was the first one I really knew that practiced ceremonial magic, was learning about that kind of thing. Because in Orlando at the time, that was not a thing to be had, really. So I kind of started getting interested then, and I picked up Donald Michael Craig's book, Modern Magic. and I started practicing the LBRP. And one night I was sitting doing laundry and I had a vision of Raphael that came, and he never really said anything. He was just kind of standing there. And this happened a couple of times, and I was then doing some artwork. I was doing a series of Egyptian gods on papyrus, some paintings. And I was working on Thoth one night, and in the doorway, Raphael came in. And I saw him standing there, and again, very, very quiet. And then he kind of dissolved, and then Thoth was standing in the doorway, except he was much bigger than the door, than it was a vision, so you could kind of see him so much larger than life. For me, that was kind of the portent of where things might be going. And whenever I got the opportunity to go to the temple for the very first time, I really wasn't sure what was going to happen. I was very interested in it, and I knew that there was a lot of opportunity to train some of my visionary talents. And when I went, Chick and Tabitha were just incredible folks. They were very welcoming. I'm very much an introvert and very nervous around new folks. And when I walked in there, it was like walking into home. When I went through the initiation process, it was not long thereafter that, I knew this was where I was supposed to be. It's definitely not for everyone, but for those that it does resonate with, I think the transformative power of the initiations, the magic that we do, those kinds of things it's incredible. And I really don't think I would be where I am today if it had not been for the training that I received through the order. I am absolutely forever indebted to the Ciceros and to the order. It's not all of that. There's a lot of personal work. There's a lot of personal work that goes into this. But, to have that knowledge and that kind of training from people that have been doing it for years and years, and to have the support of the fratres and sorores is, to me, just absolutely invaluable.
That first vision that you had of the Archangel Raphael, was that one of the first visions that you had, or earlier in life, having kind of this sixth sense, did you perceive other spirits, or did you see kind of webs of energy, or can you just kind of talk about that a little bit?
Oh, absolutely. For the most part, as I was younger, it was people that had passed on, some family members. The very first house, well, I shouldn't say the very first house, but the house I lived in with my grandparents, there was a spirit that lived in that back room that I was very much aware of. And unfortunately, I was very scared of. Family being how they are sometimes, it was like, oh, there's nothing back there, that kind of thing. But I wouldn't go back in that room by myself until I was like 14, because whatever that was just really icky and nasty. And years later, we had moved out, and I was, 17 or 18 at the time, and they finally fessed up, my grandmother and my father, that, yeah, there was something living back in that room. But until I really started kind of going into ceremonial magic, I had something of an experience with a couple of the Celtic gods and goddesses when I was working with that system for a short amount of time. But just being, I guess, visually, what's the word I'm looking for? Visually talented, I guess. Having those kinds of experiences, I don't know, I guess it's just easy for me to pick up on who is there. But it wasn't until after I started working with like the LBRP and those kinds of things, I started seeing angels, some of the more Egyptian gods, having visions of them. But there again, I had an experience with Selket. When I was very young, I was able to go to, I think it was the Metropolitan Museum in New York. My mother had lived up there, and she took me to the museum up there, and they had a beautiful Egyptian temple recreated there. I think they had brought it over from Egypt. And they had the four goddesses around the sarcophagus, and I saw Selket with the scorpion on her head, and I was so intrigued with her for years. It's what one of my email addresses actually has her name on it, because she has been an influence from the time I was, 10 or 12 years old. So there's been a lot of various entities and spirits and stuff that have come in and out of my life since I was a child. But even now, I still get experiences with all kinds of different entities. So I love being visually oriented like that and being able to see. I know a lot of folks have some trouble with it, especially at first, but it's something that you work with. And over time, I think it can become such an asset.
Yes, I'm thinking of course, as you know, you and Aaron know far better than I do, the historic duo Dee and Kelly, and there was Dee, who obviously was incredibly well versed at the invocations and calling forth various spirits, and Kelly being the scryer. With your deep experience, as you say, being so visually adept, do you and Aaron kind of participate in things like that, where your gifts, your talents, your skills are used in a ceremonial magic context?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. He's the conjurer and I'm the scryer. We can both kind of do each other's job, so to speak, but he seems to be able to call them very easily, and I'm able to sit there and kind of zone out and do my part of the process. And that is essentially how we work for the most part. Anytime we do evocations or anything like that, he's there doing the conjurations, reading the psalms. Occasionally I'll read the psalms too, because it does have a very trance-like effect. It's definitely an additive in being able to turn on that part of my brain, I guess.
I know in Secrets of the Magical Grimoires, Aaron talks a lot about entering a state of trance and prolonging trance and using the psalms and invocations to attain a higher circuitry, a higher state of consciousness. When you do that, when you go through that process of trance, is it completely intuition in a ceremonial magic context, or is there some kind of, I guess, progression where you go, okay, the psalms are going to elevate me to this circuit, and then I'm going to go to this circuit? Or is it just, I assume at your experience, it's probably all just one continuous flow?
Yeah, for the most part, whenever I can kind of feel it turning on, if that makes sense, as the psalms are read and, as the invocations are read and such. As things start to shift, as the energy starts to shift, I can feel kind of a tingling in the top of my head. And at that point, I kind of know to just sit back and close my eyes and kind of wait for the next thing to happen. The Jupiter evocation that we did back in November, worked very much the same way he was doing the conjurations. And I think I read one or two psalms out of that, but then he took over. And as I was sitting there, Yophiel was showing me a cornucopia, and he was handing it over to me. And just as he was handing that over to me, Aaron was reading a psalm that had that in it. It was something like, I give you the blessings of the fruits of the earth, or something like that. So it was very coincidental, if you will. Whenever I start seeing things like that are starting to coincide, I know that, they're there, things are happening, and I know to tell him, hey, the visions are starting, and then he can start asking questions. If there's questions or, making prayers or whatever. Wow,
that is incredible. And I can hear you shuffling cards as well. And some of our listeners might be saying, okay, here's Carrie, incredible talent. You obviously have years and years of experience with ceremonial magic, with spirit work. What the heck does this have to do with the tarot? Isn't the tarot, as a devil's advocate question, someone might be saying,
sure,
isn't the tarot, it's this Italian, European, 1400s-ish card game. There's trump cards, there's major arcana, minor arcana. What does this have to do with tarot? So I put the question to you, Carrie, and I mean, someone as so skilled as you, how did this connect with your deep spiritual sensitivity and experience to the actual use of the tarot deck?
They are, and this is why I named the tarot part of our business Keeper of the Keys, because they are essentially keys to doorways. All the information that's contained in these pictures, in these pictograms, if you will, it, at least in my opinion and the way that I was taught, enlivens those things in your mind, in your psyche, in the world around you. So you're pulling in those forces and thus, turning on that part of your brain. So you have the correspondences and the cards, but then that can also lead to intuitive openings as well. I just see it as a greater part of the whole. Whenever I read and whenever I do tarot, I am very much Golden Dawn based. It kind of goes back to my names and images are all powers awakened and reawakened. And that's kind of what the tarot is. It's the images. There's names contained therein. Sometimes they're spelled out, sometimes they're not, but it's a huge compendium of all the knowledge of the Kabbalistic tree of life. And that being said, it opens those doorways and allows that kind of information to come through.
Where did these cards originally come from? Did they start, as far as you know, with this very rich symbolism, or did that evolve over time? Just how did this whole thing, what was the genesis of this whole evolution of the tarot?
Well, it actually, unbeknownst to a lot of folks, and this is, again, a question that just absolutely fascinated me whenever I really started studying in depth in the tarot. And my first class is about the history of the tarot. It's that important to me. And I think, too, how it has evolved over the centuries. And it kind of seems to have started in China around 900 BC. And it started as a way for the aristocrats to carry games of dominoes with them. Dominoes, as I'm sure you know, could be very heavy if you were traveling or if you were a warrior that was away. They would carry games with them, and they invented sheet paper and a way of woodblock printing, so they started printing domino patterns. And this is actually where the minor arcana started. And it would change forms as it traveled the Silk Road with your various warriors and traders and these kinds of things. And to begin with, in fact, up until about the 1500s, tarot in its various forms was basically an aristocrat's game. And it didn't really begin its mystical symbolism until much later than folks really think it did, really with the occult revival in the mid-1800s. But going back to its evolution, as it traveled the Silk Road, it went into India, it went into Turkey, and at that time, we're now moving up into about 1200 AD. So it took about 500-600 years for this paper game of dominoes to travel through the various places of the Silk Road, go through its various evolutions, and then it came down into Egypt with Kipchak slaves. They were from the Caucasus Mountains around Turkey, and they were warriors, kind of enslaved warriors. And they were down into Egypt in an area called Mamluk. And it was from there, through trading, that the cards were brought up into Italy. And this is where we actually see, originally there were just the minor arcana. You had in Egypt with these Turkish slaves, you had the cups and you had dinars, which are like the pentacles or coins that we have today. But then they had polo sticks, which then evolved into batons in Italy and we now know as wands. And of course they had swords as well. But it wasn't until Italy that we started seeing the major arcana come into play. And that is really kind of a fascinating story in and of itself. There was a Duke of Milan by the name of Filippo Visconti. And his family was, very rich. He was a duke. And they had amassed a very large library. And at this time, just the cards that were the minor arcana, and we didn't even have, at this point, the princess. There were only the 3 court cards and then your ace through 10. So it hadn't even fully evolved into the minor arcana that we see today. This duke, along with his secretary, there was a lot of gambling going along at the time with the new cards that were around. This being a Catholic country, gambling was considered a big no-no. This Visconti's duke wanted to devise a game where he, instead of lowering himself by gambling, the cards could make you think. And in this original deck, and I think someone has now recreated it because The deck itself was long lost, but there was a book that did still exist. I believe I've seen someone recently has recreated this, at least attempted to. But this deck, what would have been the major arcana, were 16 Roman gods. There's an entire list of them. Again, they only had the 3 court cards. With the minor arcana, they were actually suits of birds. There were turtle doves, phoenixes, and eagles. Each one represented a different virtue or vice. The eagles represented virtues, the phoenixes represented riches, the turtle doves represented countenance or the ability to control one's behavior and oneself. The doves represented pleasure. So you had kind of 2 virtues and 2 vices. So as they were playing, they would be able to contemplate on the virtues of the gods, on the virtues of these specific animals. But unfortunately, that deck was lost at some point. There is, and I personally have not yet found it, and I would still like to do more research into how that deck became the next deck that evolved, which was also through Duke Visconti, into very much what we see as the modern tarot today. There's a deck that's been out for quite a while, and I think there's several that have been based off of it now, the Visconti Sforza Tarot. I think one of them is called the Golden Tarot. I might be misplacing it. It has the 4 minor arcana decks that we know of today, and it has all but 2 of the major arcana that we also see. And I believe the only 2 that were missing were Death and the Devil, but they just haven't found examples of it, so it's really not known whether they existed or not. Just all examples may be lost at this point. It's with Visconti and his son-in-law, Sforza. I'm misplacing his first name right now, but they are the ones that are basically responsible for the modern imagery that we see on the tarot. And also, at some point during this time, there was a deck called the Solabusca Tarot, that its minor arcana, a lot of their pictures seem to have influenced Pamela Coleman Smith and her artwork for the minor arcana of the A.E. Waite deck. So there's a lot of history there. But even still, at that point, it's still really kind of just a game. There was not a whole lot of, as we would know it, mystical symbolism or mystical representation. They would play a game that was kind of sort of like divination, but it would be 2 to 4 people, and you would sit across from your partners and you would have them draw 7 cards, 5 to 7 cards, I think. And for the cards, you would have to make up a sonnet. And usually they were very bawdy. So this was not your traditional divination that we know today. And so far, the first instance I've really seen of them being used for divination was around 1500s. But then it kind of seems to have fallen out again. And a gentleman by the name of Antoine Court de Gabelin, he had written a treatise in it's a very, very long French title, but it's the history of the natural world, essentially, the short form of it. He actually is the first one to go back and say that the tarot was this mystic form that was invented by the Egyptian pharaohs and how mystical it is and such. But it was really just kind of his invention, and he did do some meanings for the major arcana cards, I believe it was. But even then, it was still kind of short. As time evolved, it went through several other rather well-known diviners of the time. Atiya, his name is spelled backwards, and then there was another woman by the name of Mademoiselle Lenormand, and she was more of the playing card divination. And she added some other pictures and such, but it too kind of evolved from the playing cards of the time. So there was all kinds of things going on as tarot moved forward, but it really wasn't until the occult revival in the mid 1800s that real meaning started being established for each one of the cards, and how we see the Hebrew letters, the astrological symbols, the planets, all of that started to be added in after that. Antoine Court de Gebelin had assigned some of the Hebrew letters, had assigned the Hebrew letters, then Eliphas Levi took them and kind of changed them and put them in a different order, and so on and so forth until we get to A.E. Waite and the Golden Dawn. And even still, Crowley changed some of the Hebrew letters and some of the paths as well. So it's got a very strange and mixed up history.
The average listener out there might be saying, okay, it started with the minor arcana. You have these four suits, you have wands and you have cups and swords and you have pentacles. But then these major arcana, as you mentioned, these, 22 cards. We have the Fool, the Magician, the High Priestess, the Empress, the Emperor, the Lovers, the Chariot. When these major arcana cards, like the Fool, the Magician, the High Priestess, when these came about, were they automatically imbued with all of this symbolism for the purpose of divination and kind of mystical readings, or was the symbolism arising out of more, I guess, tangible or physical purposes? As
I understand it, whenever they were first devised, there really was no real mystical meaning behind them. But personally, I kind of find that hard to believe because they do follow such a pattern. And there is, even if you look in the major arcana cards of like the Visconti Sforza decks and things like that, there is a lot of symbolism already imbued in them. So just because they didn't use them for divination doesn't mean that it wasn't there. But there was also the influence, at least with some of the cards, I believe, from a writer and humanist at the time by the name of Petrarch. And he was really, really famous in his day. And he wrote a series of 6 sonnets. And they were based on various ideas. The first one, you had love, you had chastity, you had death, you had time, you had eternity. People of the time, it became so famous, artists were starting to do paintings and make pictures and decorate household items with the ideas behind these sonnets. And the pictures that are of death are of fame, is also the title of one of the sets of sonnets. And fame has the image of essentially Venus riding in on a chariot. So there was definitely some influence, some kind of mystical influence there. But again, the divination meanings really didn't come about until later.
Carrie, when it comes to the Tree of Life, can you tell our listeners a little bit about how the major arcana are applied or laid onto the Tree of Life? Would it be fair to say that each trump card doesn't represent a Sephiroth or an actual sphere like Kether?
Right.
Or
the trump cards are what connects the paths.
Yes, they
between
connect the paths.
The Sephiroth. Right. And usually whenever you're looking at them, you will find kind of a balancing effect between what the path is and what the sphere is. For example, whenever you go into Hode, the sphere of Hode, you have 2 very fiery cards that are attached to that. And then whenever you go into Netzach, you have a couple of watery cards to kind of balance out the fire. So there seems to be a balancing effect, just like you would have with the flaming sword that comes down from Kether that fixes your Sephiroth. As you come up from the bottom, you have the Serpent of Wisdom that keeps the paths. And that's where the major arcana fall. And with the major arcana, you're looking at bigger ideas. You're looking at things that can be movable. And with your numbered cards, they fit right into the various spheres. And interestingly enough, that just this past weekend, I did a talk on how the spheres of the Tree of Life influence the cards of the minor arcana, with your aces being influenced from Kether. You know, you have the energy of Kether, the divine, the one, and where ideas are still kind of up in the ether. There's nothing really that's concrete yet. It hasn't come down into manifestation. And with your aces, you have that initial force. Whatever that force is, whether it's fire, whether it's water, air, earth, it's that initial force of that element. Very commonly, you'll have an image of a hand that is holding the specific tool. Sometimes, like within the Rider-Waite deck, you'll see a hand coming out of a cloud holding the wand, holding the cup. And the hand coming out of a cloud is a very, very traditional symbolism of the hand of God, the hand of the divine coming down and handing over some idea, some gift, some blessing to you. So that's how Kether is kind of applied to the energy of the aces. Because of the element, you have various other forces that also come into play. And something that I hadn't thought about, and it was kind of one of those wonderful things that happens where you get an idea or you realize something in the middle of a lecture. Whenever I go through and I talk about tarot, another one of the spheres that has a very powerful, very kind of in your face influence is Gevura. Think of your fives as you go through the minor arcana. There's not a five that is comfortable or pleasant to deal with because you have that very harsh martial Gevuric influence running throughout all of your five cards. And then, and this is the one that kind of made us all go, okay, that's very interesting, was how the nines work in Yesod. If you think of the image of the nine of wands in the Rider-Waite deck, it's a guy standing there and he's all bandaged and there's like a fence behind him and he's leaning on one of the wands and he looks all the worse for wear. Your nine of swords, there's some poor woman just coming out of a bad dream or a nightmare, or maybe she has insomnia, crying, she's worried, and you have the nine swords in the background. But then, and these are your two active or masculine forces that are in Yesod, your nine of wands and your nine of swords. But then whenever we look at feminine passive elements, your water and your earth, these two seem to fit well in Yesod. Your nine of cups, it's the guy standing there and he looks like he's cock of the walk and he's got the cups behind him and everything is going wonderfully. Nine of pentacles, it's lady in her garden and everything's growing. So the influence of the spheres definitely has a huge impact on how the minor arcana work, and it gives a lot of influence into how to read it as well, I think.
You literally just blew my mind, and I'm going through the deck as we're speaking. I have the Rider-Waite deck in front of me, and yeah, it's just incredible. I mean, that poor guy with the wands, he looks all banged up, and this poor woman, I mean, the nine of swords, I believe, and she just can't seem to get a break. I mean, this is like meaning within meaning. And Carrie, I'm wondering, for instance, the nine of swords is a great example. When that comes up in an actual divination procedure, I assume it depends on what position the nine of swords comes up, but when it does come up, do you apply that from the Yesodic perspective where it carries that kind of Kabbalistic force, or do you apply it with that force maybe secondarily, but the first would be whatever attributes are directly associated with that card? Or I guess how does this factor in when that card comes into play?
Well, honestly, that's, I think, where a lot of the intuition starts coming into play. And this is something else that we were talking about within the lecture, too. Whenever you're reading, sometimes you'll have certain images, certain things that stand out more than others, depending on what the question is, who you're reading for, just whatever factors there may be that are influencing that part of the intuition, spirits that are giving you guidance, what have you. And that's one of the reasons why I love tarot so much, is because there is so much information contained within each one that can then be taken. And I look at magic like a language. It's learning another language, just as tarot is learning another language. And I believe that, spirits, entities, what have you, this helps them communicate with us. So whenever I'm doing a reading and say, because I've actually got a few of my Golden Dawn cards just kind of splayed out in front of me. I've got the Six of Cups laying here. So whenever I'm doing a reading, I look at the six and I say, okay, this is sitting in Teferet. But that's not the only thing to look at. There's so many other factors. What cards are around it? You also have the fact that this is the deacon of the sun in Scorpio, because each one of the cards 1 through 10 all have decanate association as well. So you have the astrological part of it. You have the planet of the decanate, just all of these various factors that can come into play. And, I'm looking at this right now, and what's really standing out to me is this particular card has a blue foreground with a yellow background. And right now, for me, it is the yellow that is standing out. And I'm just going to kind of go with the flow here. This is kind of a spiritual card. It can be emotions. It's good things. It can be growth. But the yellow here, there's communication. There's some communication ideas going on, which is kind of very appropriate for what we're doing right now. So there's lots of different things that can be read into it, depending on the question and the situation. Now, if I had the Six of Cups here and let's say the Eight of Swords I have here. So if this is combined, things look like they're going well, but something doesn't come through. Something isn't able to be communicated with clear action, with clear ideas, with clear thoughts. So there's all kinds of modification that can go on around these.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So as you say, it's kind of language where each of the cards represents a different letter in a sentence, or a different sentence in some kind of paragraph of meaning, or kind of each card is a different note in a kind of musical way where there might be harmony or disharmony. Is it kind of like that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Whenever I'm doing readings for folks, very often, whenever I see these cards, you can see where, certain blockages will come up, like things are going well, but, sometimes folks are their own worst enemy. They get in their own way. I've often seen the Eight of Swords here come up whenever folks are starting to experience some kind of success or things are going well. And success can be kind of a scary thing, so they'll pull back and they might not get as far as they would have had they continued to pour their heart into it. And that's just one kind of short example of how this can work. But the exact opposite can be true, where people think they're doing so well, and then, they're not seeing some of the warnings that are coming up. Maybe they're taking too much time off of what they need to be doing, going and playing instead of working hard like they need to.
That's probably the card that Aaron Leitch gets a lot, right? The one where he's not working hard, but he needs to kind of try a little harder.
Yeah, just a little bit. You know what? I think I need to set the Ace of Wands under his rear end.
Touche.
Light him on fire. It all works. I got to be good. He's been working really hard, and he's awesome. You two are probably the hardest working couple in ceremonial magic and esotericism. So. Well, I will say, especially as things keep going the way they are. That's as an aside. Carrie, let me ask you this. This other element of the tarot, in addition to how the cards can kind of, have harmony or disharmony or affect one another in a reading, and that is just taking individual cards, for example, individual major arcana or the trump cards, and using them as a kind of contemplative mysticism practice, that you can either scry with the cards, I've heard, or you can just take one, yes. And you could take one card and literally use it as a sense of contemplative mysticism, in effect. Can you just kind of share with our listeners about that? I mean, for example, I'm holding the Fool card right now. Considering the basics of it, okay, I know that the Fool card represents
a path. I know it represents the first path, the path that connects Kether, or the first sphere or Sephiroth, to Hokmah, or the second sphere or Sephiroth. And I'm looking at it, and it looks like there's this guy with a bag. He's holding a white rose. There's a dog barking at him, and he looks like he's about to walk off a cliff, and he's a fool. He looks like he's clearly a fool. I mean, these are some of the basic things going through my head, but for someone like you, can you kind of walk our listeners through, say, with the Fool card, how would you use that card as an example of contemplative mysticism?
It is someone that's definitely starting out on a journey. The Fool could be used in a lot of different ways. It's interesting that you actually picked that one, because that was one of the first ones that I had a real experience like that with. A long, long time ago, I was, in fact, I may have been like 21 or 22. I had an experience with this card, and the Fool became the fiddler from Fiddler on the Roof. And he projected a big aleph at me. But anyhow, this is, it was the time whenever I was kind of really starting off really heavy into my magical path. So it was very appropriate at the time. But this guy, he's a seeker, and he's looking to go out on a journey. But he also has to be aware of the pitfalls and the dangers around him. If one is contemplating on this card, there's all kinds of symbolism here. The young man here, he's wearing this green tunic with these yellow roses. Knowledge, desire for things, for knowledge, for building his repertoire, if you would. He's also holding the white rose, which is a symbol of spiritual purity. So there's the idea of needing to keep pure in some form or fashion. Then we have the dog at his feet. Is this his loyal companion, or is this dog going to distract him where he ends up falling off the cliff? The bag that he's carrying is a bag essentially of secrets. I don't see it on here. Some of the representations of his little bag there has T on it, and it's representing the mysteries of the tarot. It's a wonderful card for contemplating new ideas, new paths, those kinds of things. But it's also something to contemplate, to see, what things might I be missing? What might be my pitfall? What might throw me off of my path? So there's a couple of different ideas that are wrapped up in this particular card. Of course, we have associations with the Hebrew letter Aleph, air. So, things like communication, travel, those kinds of ideas. And then also there's some mercurial forces going on there as well. So being fleet-footed, being able to move through situations with adaptation, being mutable in one's ideas and one's ways of going about things. If something doesn't work, or if you're running into some kind of danger or pitfall, you have to be malleable enough to change your outlook, change your focus, and be able to change your path at a moment's notice.
Yeah, that is fascinating. And one of the symbols in the card is a dog barking, and I think I hear one in the background. I think there's an actual dog barking. So this might be a sign, actually, that the Fool card is taking precedence over.
We have quite a few around here. In fact, that may be my hound Cerberus that is in the background.
I love the name.
He has a pretty interesting story. He's still pretty much a wild dog. I go out on walks frequently, and basically to connect with the local spirits and see what omens are out there, because I love to go out and kind of read omens and see what's going on in the world around me. I happen to be out there. It's a local park, but it's very wooded and very swampy. The day before this, I had gone there, and this is the middle of July in Florida. So hot doesn't even begin to describe what it was like.
Oh, yeah.
It's like stepping into a sauna. So I had gone into the kind of swampy forested area up onto the boardwalk the day before, and I started talking to the local spirits. I kind of asked them some questions, and I asked them to send me a sign. And I was kind of, hanging out with my arms on the edge of the boardwalk, and lo and behold, and this is like 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, a huge barn owl flies in and flies into a magnolia tree right across from me. And I'm looking up going, you've got to be kidding me. If it had been instantaneous, I probably would have fainted. At least they gave me a couple moments to kind of prepare, I guess. Yeah, that owl came in, and I'm like, holy cow. You know, because it was so unusual, and it was so pretty, and I was talking to him. Then we both went on our ways, and I went back there the next day, and that's whenever I found the dog that is now Cerberus at the entrance to the forest, guarding it. And he was so skinny, he was probably a couple of days away from dying. Somebody had dumped him, and he had probably been abused. So I ended up essentially trying to make friends with the beast and got him home, and he hangs out in our backyard, and we take care of him, and he takes care of us. And it's so appropriate for our house. We have a few angels associated with Samael hanging around, so for protection. So, you know, he's a great addition to the gang that protects the house here.
That is awesome, and kind of a nice compliment to exactly this Fool card. And there's another card, Carrie, that has always, although all the major arcana and minor captivate the attention in one way or another, there's also ones that seem to be much more mysterious. And I'm wondering if you can help our listeners just get a basic overall apprehension of the cards. And one of them would be the Hangman. I'm going to do this from memory, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but the Hangman is a card that connects the path between Gevurah and Hod, and it is associated with the Hebrew letter Mem, which I believe is also the word for water, and it's associated with the element of water, and the number 40, which is associated with the letter M in Hebrew. And the Hangman, you look at it, you say, well, there's this person hanging upside down, they're being hung from a tree with some leaves on it, but, you know, this connects, you know, Gevurah and Hod, and it's supposed to be associated with water and the number 40, but I don't see any water anywhere. What the heck is going on? So can you kind of, you know, for those listeners out there who might be considering the major arcana, especially more mysterious ones like that, can you help us through that a little bit?
Oh, absolutely. And I'm actually going through my deck here too. I've got one of the representations up here, the Cicero Golden Dawn one, but I'm going through trying to find my Rider-Waite representation. Again, funny coincidence, I was in a local shop that I do readings in yesterday, and the Hangman came up in this one lady's reading. It was so appropriate to her situation that I ended up explaining the full symbolism of the card to her. But here I have the Rider-Waite one, the Cicero one, and Thoth deck one, the Crowley deck. And if you look at this guy, he is hanging upside down on a tree. So we kind of have the crucifixion represented here. You know, it's somebody that's been suspended in action. But if we look further at it, and I'll go into the Rider-Waite card first, he is someone who, again, is seeking spiritual enlightenment. And as he hangs on this cross, if you notice, the wood is in leaf. So there's generation going on here. There's something growing. There's something, it's not a dead thing, if that makes sense. As we look at him, he's hanging upside down, and his legs are forming also a tau cross, and his hands are bound behind him, or in some representations they're bound above his head, but his hands are bound. And at this point, it's representing someone who has not yet mastered the elements yet. The material is still kind of over the spiritual at this point. But he's hanging here, and if we look at the Golden Dawn version of the deck, below his head is a rainbow, the Veil of Paraketh. So we're looking at potential, at promises of things happening. And this one too, the tree that he's hanging off of has a representation of the Norse god Odin. who also hung from a tree. So we have the idea of suspension, but there's enlightenment coming. This is for a reason. Things are happening. Now, again, whenever it comes up in a reading, it really depends on what's around it. If someone's going to stay in stasis, if there's enlightenment coming, something like that. But as a mystical card, as something to contemplate on, it's the idea of sometimes having to sacrifice things for spiritual knowledge, having to master oneself so that one can have mastery over the elements, over the material world. And at times it can just be the suspension of activity where one is needed to rest before you can go on to the next stage. But the idea that, like Odin, like Jesus, there's some kind of enlightenment that is supposed to come from this.
The symbolism that might not be apparent on the surface is something where, when it comes to contemplation, that it is subtly revealed through deeper and deeper meanings.
Oh, absolutely. Whenever I go into my intermediate classes, that is something I absolutely tell my students to do, and we actually do an exercise where you will meditate on a tarot card. Because I can teach all the kinds of symbolism. I can, tell you where the cards came from, this kind of thing. But they also tell stories in and of themselves. And they, especially whenever we're working with them in a mystical context, they speak to us in different ways. The larger message may be the same. This has the elements of this. This has the elements of that. The Fool, you're starting something. The Hanged Man, there's some knowledge or enlightenment coming. The Wheel of Fortune, there's some change on the way. But how that is represented in one's own life in a reading, how that is represented to one mystically, how that affects one's life overall is a very personal process. Using these cards as mystical devices, as scrying devices, things like that, I think it's absolutely essential to look into them deeper and to let them talk to us and to let them share knowledge with us. That's really where I think the idea that I got Saturday, whenever I realized how the nines were working in the Yesod, depends on how you look at it. It was either the cards showing me something else, or it was an inspiration from, whatever deities were hanging around at the time, some combination thereof. That is why I think it is essential to work with them not only one by one, but just the constant practice. Whenever people learn to read, some folks don't want to start reading for anyone until they know, every last letter, every single correspondence. Actively doing that is something that helps to teach those correspondences and helps get them into your psyche and helps get them kind of into the world around you. That's where true intuition lies, is whenever it starts speaking to you in that different way.
And to Carrie, when it comes to, as you say, each card, each path has many, many different associations. Where does the actual Hebrew numbers come into play? So, for example, with the Hangman, the number 40, is that something that you, when you're doing either contemplation or a reading, does that factor in directly, or is that more in kind of like gematria or gematria, where you're basically using kind of the addition of certain numbers to achieve mystical numbers for contemplation?
Me personally, no, I don't really use the numbers associated with them. That really, to me, is more of a gematria thing, although I'm sure others might disagree, but for me, no, that's not something that really interests me. And now the words, sometimes those will end up having a bigger influence. A while back, I was doing some work with the Justice card. Its associated letter is Lamed. It means ox goad, keeping the oxen on the path. But you do so gently. So there's the idea of keeping the path, keeping rules, keeping tradition, but doing so in a more gentle way. You don't have to beat it into submission. But that is, that's just one example of how the letter itself has influenced what I've seen. But as for the particular numbers themselves, I personally don't really use them within the tarot.
Gotcha. And then the astrological or the elemental associations, I imagine that plays a pretty decent role. Like for the Hangman, you mentioned the element of water and how there's growth and that the tree is flowering. Does that, or the tree has leaves on it, does that kind of factor in?
Oh, absolutely. Especially those kinds of symbolisms where you have, like we mentioned, the Hangman, he has mem and water, and, you know, it's spiritual. Water transmits the spiritual aspects, the subconscious, things like that. The universe, the path of Tao, and Saturn, you know, that is fixed. It is the end. It is the ultimate culmination of some factor. Just like Saturn is, he's kind of the timekeeper, and he's the limits of our solar system, or at least was with the visible planets. But, you know, he's kind of the heavy keeper of the ways. And I find, especially in the minor arcana, the planet and astrological symbolism that is associated with each one of those is also very, very important. Whenever I go through these and we talk about the symbolism of the cards, I always include the planet and the astrological association of those cards, because it is so inherent to the meanings of the cards within the minor arcana. Like looking at this one, just happened to pop up, the Nine of Pentacles. It's called material gain, is one of the things one of the titles that it has. You know, we have the nine we were talking about Yesod earlier, but here its associations are Venus and Virgo. And Venus is a good planet. You have Virgo, which is the earth sign, the Virgin, so things are growing. And then you have Venus, and Venus works very well in this particular sign. So there's a lot of growth. There's, you know, just the idea of happiness. And if you think of the Rider-Waite Nine of Pentacles with she almost looks like the Empress, the image of the Empress too, where she's standing there and she's got everything's just grown, and she is the queen of her own garden. You know, so the astrological symbols can play very much into reading what these mean. Occasionally I'll also, especially if there's some astrological aspect that is going on currently, sometimes that can also affect how this is read. You know, if Venus is really well aspected at some given time, this influence may be more powerful than, you know, say if she's gone retrograde or something to that effect.
I'm wondering too, Carrie, I know one of the differences, so to speak, that I know people like Dr. Stephen Skinner talk about between ceremonial magic and tarot or divination methods is that, at least according to authors like him, that ceremonial magic is very active. It's where you are not necessarily petitioning a deity for anything, but you're actually, invoking or evoking certain spirits, either, angels or more infernal chthonic beings to achieve something, whereas divination might be seen as more passive, and instead of looking to change the future, divination is about predicting the future and letting people know what might happen or how things are looking. Do you kind of see it that way?
I can actually agree with that. With ceremonial magic, you are doing things to have an effect, to change something in your sphere of influence. And with any kind of divination method, really, you're just kind of looking at a picture of where things are at any given time. Mm-hmm. Because as we know, things can change rapidly. Some things don't, but some things do. And whenever I do divinations, I definitely think it does have a place. Anytime I do any kind of spell work or anything for myself, I always do a couple of tarot readings. If it's something that's really important, I will go to a friend or another reader that I trust. I'll say, hey, I'm, looking at doing this. How are things looking right now? And they can tell me, hey, this might have this effect. They might be able to give me some warning, something like that. For the most part, it is more just kind of a passive thing, just seeing where things are at any given time. But that being said, there are ways of, performing magic and using tarot cards in various spell work. It's not something that is, at least as I know it, traditionally grimoire-ic, but it's something more, I think, influenced from lodge magic, ceremonial magic in that way. They can even be used for spells too. But yeah, for the most part, it is just a picture of where things are at any given time.
I think there might be some listeners out there, Carrie, who are thinking to themselves, okay, I've read Secrets of the Magical Grimoires, I'm practicing ceremonial magic, I'm, reading about the Goetia or the Key of Solomon or drawing spirits into crystals, and I'm doing this thing, this ceremonial magic thing, and this whole tarot thing, can that really apply to me? Can that help me? What are the relationships? And you just touched on this. Can you talk about the kind of, even though they may seem very, very different, that they actually might have a lot to do with each other, especially when it comes to the associations, the resonances, the symbolism? I guess, how does the grimoire work support or amplify the tarot work, and vice versa? How does the tarot work, how can that help buoy or kind of support a magician's interest in the esoteric?
That's a big question. There's so many different ways that these things can intersect. Whenever you're dealing with, evoking entities, whenever you're dealing with, kind of changing the fabric of the universe on a large scale or a small scale, I think it's always a good idea to see what effect that might have. Some people, have no problem just kind of going along and not worrying about the consequences of what they might be doing. Say you're doing a money spell, or you're doing some kind of evocation where you're trying to obtain money that you need. You always want to be careful first how you ask, but you also want to see, how might this work? Because if this is going to end up, causing you later on down the line to become homeless, this is something you might not want to do. Because, you never know how these things might work. It might seem wonderful at the time. All the stars might be in alignment, what have you, but there may be something that you're missing. Looking into it, either if one is reading for themselves or, through another skilled practitioner, I think it's a really good idea to look and see what effects this kind of work might have. And that's really where I see tarot's use overall in magic, as far as like the grimoire stuff and all, because there's not a whole lot of it where you're going to be using the Ace of Swords and Key of Solomon evocation,
Right.
But, you can certainly ask, how is this evocation going to go? Is there something that I'm missing? Is there something else that I need to do? What effect might this have in the short term and the long term? There's all kinds of things that you can see through the use of tarot. Divination in general, but at least to me, tarot seems to have a larger compendium of knowledge, and a lot more ideas seem to come through.
I'm thinking of yourself and Aaron, but I'm also thinking of even classical magicians like John Dee, who obviously a deep knowledge of astrology and associations and resonances. I mean, it wasn't just straight up Enochian work. It was also really recognizing the resonances between that, which is, I think, what you're saying, which is really that all of these deep questions and kind of contemplative tarot investigations can actually really help support magicians.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You have all of this knowledge just kind of combined into it's like a flashcard set. It's the flashcard set of the gods. And
I like that.
And it can help folks, learn the various correspondences. It can enliven those parts of your brain. It can show you what might happen in the future, how you might go about certain things. Just like the Tree of Life, it's kind of the map of the knowledge of the universe.
You use tarot, obviously, all the time for clients, personally. And one of the public examples where I think you shared a little bit about this, and correct me if I'm wrong, is right before the really bad hurricane hit Florida in 2017. And there were so many people saying, what's going to happen, this and that. And I believe you said something on Facebook to the effect of, which turned out to be obviously very, very accurate, which is, yes, this is going to be severe in some areas, but it's not going to be as ridiculously, horribly crazy statewide as everyone is predicting. And it turned out, and I remember reading that and watching the Weather Channel, and then lo and behold, the hurricane really did turn out that way. And I guess I'm wondering, did that specific investigation and conclusion, did that come from yourself working with the tarot, with divination? Because that was, I think, a pretty interesting example of how it kind of came to pass.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I have, several friends around the area, and several people were doing readings on it. And there were a couple of cards. I don't remember what they were off the top of my head. Oh, that's right. The Empress and the Devil kept coming up in my readings and a couple of others as well. And it was it kind of seems to be the underpinning of a lot of things that have been happening lately, where Mother Nature's mad. She's pissed. And she's kind of taking it out on us, I think. Yeah. But, it was definitely, we were at the mercy of Mother Nature at the time. I know on that particular post, I did list all the cards. I can't remember what they were off the top of my head, but it was a combination of intuition and then seeing the various symbolism in the cards, and then also getting other visions, I guess, as I was doing that particular reading. And whenever I do these things, I still kind of wonder while I'm in the process, especially with that one, it's I really hope this is accurate. And I really hope this is something that really comes to pass, because if anything is unpredictable, it is certainly hurricanes. Even, as we watched the weather, nobody had any idea what was going to happen, where this thing was going to go. We did a lot of magic in the run-up and during that whole incident with Hurricane Irma. I think it was just the combination of all the magic we had done and then being able to see how that might play out. I was grateful. For me, it just kind of gave me a peace of mind that, being a native here, I figured it was probably not going to be as bad as they were saying it was.
Right.
But it was also nice to see that play out in the cards too. And then seeing ultimately how everything played out in the material realm. To see the astral realm and the material realm line up is still, to me, just absolutely fascinating and leaves me in awe.
How does tarot play into your daily routine? When you get up in the morning or at night? I mean, where does it fit in?
There's usually some influence of tarot in my day. And it sounds kind of funny, but I actually have an app that sends me a card a day. And it's turned out to be surprisingly accurate sometimes, more often than not. But for myself, sometimes I'll usually about once a week or so, I'll kind of do a quick reading just to see what I need to pay attention to that week, if there's anything that I need to be careful of, any kind of warnings, anything like that. Now, that being said, I personally don't like to read for myself whenever it's especially important matters, or something that I might be of several minds on, which I often tend to be. I like to see various parts of a problem or various parts of a question. And whenever it's applying to my own life, it's whenever I see the cards, it's okay, I could interpret it this way, I could interpret it this way, and I could interpret it this way. Which one is actually the way it should be? Usually I'll have a pretty good idea, but I always like to go to someone else and just kind of verify and see if there's anything I missed. Sometimes they'll pick up on things that, either I don't see, or being human, that I don't want to see. But I'm very fortunate to have some wonderful associates that, also tell it like it is and aren't afraid to tell me, hey, don't do it this way, do it this way. So I think it's very, very important, no matter if you're reading for yourself or for someone else, to be very objective, to say, and to try not to influence it with your own opinions. That can be very, very difficult. Even whenever you're reading for other folks, people will come to you with all kinds of issues, problems. Sometimes they're very delicate issues. Sometimes you may not necessarily agree with how they're going about things or what they're doing, but it's not about you at that point. It is about what they need. It is about, getting their questions answered in a way that is going to help them. It's not about what your opinion is. It is about what they need, what the spirits are saying, what the cards are saying. So, and sometimes, that can be difficult to separate those things sometimes, but I think it's absolutely imperative to do so.
This kind of leads to a question that a lot of people have, and this is a total devil's advocate question, is why so many different kinds of tarot decks, Carrie? I mean, I'm doing a Google search right here. There's a Pagan Otherworlds deck. There's a Sacred Creators deck. There's a Small Spells tarot. I think I saw a Game of Thrones tarot deck the other day.
I have no doubt you did. I have a Lord of the Rings tarot. There's like this mini Rider-Waite glow-in-the-dark tarot set.
No.
There's one I ran across recently where it's King Solomon's tarot deck. There's 1,000,001 different decks, and I think there's a lot of different reasons for that. I personally tend to stay pretty traditional. I like the traditional symbolism. It's easy for me to read. One of the biggest things I think is not everyone is comfortable with a lot of the symbolism that is contained within the tarot. Because there's a lot of Christian symbolism. There's a lot of various other things that some people may not be comfortable with. That stems from some of it. And also I think, speaking as an artist, I think that's one of the ultimate things to do if you're an artist and a mystic is to create your own tarot deck. That being said, folks have taken a lot of different ideas and applied them to the tarot and to some of their symbolism. But unfortunately, I do think some of the decks and some of the writers kind of miss it. But, to each their own. One of the very first decks that I've ever got before I joined the Golden Dawn or anything was Legend, the Arthurian tarot deck. Somehow or another, I still have every card of this deck, which is a miracle in and of itself. But while a lot of the symbolism kind of is the same, like the first card that's up here is the Priestess. She is associated with the goddess Nimue. And, whenever I had gotten this, I was very familiar with a lot of the Celtic legends, things like that. So while the overall meaning is the same, some of the nuances I think are a little different. And I think that's true of all of like your art decks and things like that. The folks who do the artwork for them, the folks who write the books, they're going to have their own take on what these things mean and how they are incorporated into their own pantheon, into their own way of working. So I think there's just so many reasons why there are so many out there now. And, some are better than others as far as the symbolism goes. But as long as I think the symbolism of the deck that you're choosing to work with that, hone your skills, then you'll be a good reader. Personally, like I said, I really tend to stick with the traditional symbolism. Yes. There's nothing like it.
Yeah, for sure. And I might be just a crusty old traditionalist, but when you were mentioning, especially as an artist, that awesome genesis of your own creativity to make your own deck and how awesome that is, I kept thinking, is some of the symbolism lost by going to these new decks? I mean, for example, with, as you said, the Fool, holding a white rose, a symbol of purity, the embroidered clothing, the mysterious bag. I mean, there's all this intentional symbolism in the Fool card in the traditional deck, but a Jon Snow card in Game of Thrones might not have that same. So is some of the symbolism lost, or is it more of, well, if you're a truly sincere person and create your own deck, then as long as you have symbolism in there, then it's okay? I mean, is that, or how do you see that?
I definitely tend to be a crusty traditionalist myself as far as that goes. Because, I do think some of the meaning is lost in the translation. Whenever the tarot started, whenever we started having the major arcana, the Fool was literally a fool. He was the Joker. He was, the guy with the funny hat, entertaining the aristocracy and the royalty. He was literally acting the fool. And as time went on, we kind of transformed that card into a more mystical meaning. But yeah, if you start getting into things like, mentioning Jon Snow as the fool, or, God, I wish I could remember who the fool was on the Lord of the Rings tarot that I have. But, it's some of it's lost. Some of it may translate well, but for the most part, I think there are some nuances that are lost within this translation, simply because a lot of the folks that are creating this deck didn't even start with the traditional symbolism. They just said, oh, hey, this would be a good fool card. Never mind the white rose and the yellow roses and the little dog. I've seen all kinds of fool cards. Sometimes it's just a guy with a stick.
Wow. Yeah.
What all does that really say? What all can you really read from that? Now, that being said, once you have all of that symbolism, then yeah, it can be easily translated to other decks. But I think it's really, really essential to have a good, firm basis in the traditional symbolism.
Yes, absolutely. And by the way, I just did a Google search. It looks like the Fool, you have Pippin and Merry who are stealing pumpkins from a farmer's lot, I believe. So a couple of hobbits seem to be on the Fool card of the Lord of the Rings deck, I believe.
That's so totally not the same idea.
Right. Yeah. So there you go, folks. You have heard it from a tarot expert herself, that is not the same idea. So do not go buying Babylon 5 sci-fi tarot decks, okay?
If you buy them for the art, that's wonderful. And there are several that I have just simply because I do love the artwork of them. But to read with them, I don't think it would be a productive endeavor.
I think our listeners will definitely get value out of that, but also a kick out of that when the next time they come across the next, Lego tarot deck or whatever's coming out next.
Oh goodness. There's gotta be probably 20 a year at least, I would say, coming out. Sometimes people really hit on it. A lady in one of my classes, she had, I think it was one of the steampunk tarot decks.
Oh, wow.
And that one, yeah, and that one surprised the hell out of me, because it actually did keep to a lot of the same symbolism as the Rider-Waite and the Thoth deck too.
Wow.
There was some crossover there. I don't recall who did that particular deck, and I think there's at least two, if not 3 or 4 steampunk themed decks out currently. And I wish I could remember who the person was that did this particular one, because it was, of the art decks that I've seen, that was probably the most impressive with keeping the traditional symbolism alive in it. Some of it was a little different, but it still kind of seemed to hold to the same energy, the same idea that the traditional cards would have used.
For many people out there who might be listening, they say, okay, I want to learn about the tarot. I really want to get involved either from a contemplative mysticism aspect or a divination aspect. But what are, Carrie, 2 or 3 of the biggest things that people should not do with the tarot? Or I guess, what are 2 or 3 of the biggest things that people don't understand about it that might be 2 or 3 pitfalls that, that you just want them to be aware of?
Well, I would say, number 1, don't ask just BS questions. I know everybody needs to practice and everybody needs to learn, but this isn't the same kind of game that we were looking at, 500-600 years ago. Whenever you ask questions of the tarot, you do need to be clear, you need to be succinct, because they can be, at least I found, rather interesting, rather sarcastic in their answers sometimes. So one of the things I think is to definitely respect the fact that it is a tool. It is a divination tool. It is something that shares sacred imagery. It is something that teaches. So I think it is important to, at least respect the spirit of that.
do people get so excited when they start out that they just start reading everything into tarot, and then they might rush things and get things? I mean, so what?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's definitely that aspect of it. Whenever folks first start out, they want all of it right now. While tarot and, you know, the basis with the Tree of Life, it does carry a lot of symbolism with it. You know, not everything's going to be in there. One of the things that I also, I would say be careful of is a lot of folks tend to want to read the worst into the cards. You know, whenever you start seeing things like, you know, the Nine of Swords popping up, or Death, or the Tower, or something like that, you know, a lot of folks, when they're first starting out, it's like, you know, this is big, bad, this is scary. Some folks will put away their cards for years because they happen to get a couple of the quote-unquote scary cards in their readings. And, you know, yeah, sometimes they can represent warnings, some scary things popping up, but, you know, it should be treated as exactly that. And not everything is a disaster. You have to have a very balanced outlook whenever you're doing readings. You can't be overly optimistic either, saying, you know, if someone's coming to you with marital trouble, oh no, it's wonderful, things will pass, you know, and instead you're sitting here looking at like the Ten of Wands and the Three of Swords. You know, this is probably something that's not going to work out well. So you really have to look at it from a very balanced point of view. You don't want to be overly optimistic, but at the same token, you don't want to be overly morbid. Not everything's a disaster, but not everything's a butterflies and roses.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So, and I think a lot of times, especially as people start moving out of kind of the learning and practice phase and really getting into the meat of it and really going out and doing readings, is, you know, you're going to run into difficult questions, but you have to work with these people with compassion. You're kind of like their counselor at that moment. You have to be real. You have to tell them what's up, but you also, by the same token, can't be, you know, like the harbinger of death. You know, giving people true and accurate information is important, but you're not looking to break their spirit either. I'm not going to sugarcoat things, but I'm also not going to be a total jerk about it either. You know, sometimes some really hard things will come up, and it may be a question of some warning pops up that somebody may be gravely ill. You know, we can look at this one of several ways, but you might want to be careful of X, Y, or Z. And a lot of times, you know, people will ask, well, is there something that I can do to change this or mitigate this? And a lot of times it is possible to change these outcomes. Whenever we're working with tarot, not everything is set in stone. What you're reading right at this moment, just because every word out of your mouth doesn't come to fruition doesn't mean you're a horrible reader. Sometimes things are going to change that are outside of your knowledge. And it also happens where, and I think this is something that can kind of throw people off, is whenever you're reading for someone else, sometimes you're not allowed to know the answers. Sometimes the reader isn't allowed to know for some personal reason, or that person isn't allowed to know what the divine has planned for them, how this is going to play out. And that's not a failing of the reader, and it's not a failing of the cards, and it's not a failing of the person that you're reading for. It is just sometimes how the universe works. Sometimes you're just not allowed to know the answer to a particular question. And a lot of times, unfortunately, those are some of the harder questions that come along. I, for some reason, end up with a lot of folks who look to start families, you know, and they may have had some difficulty or something else might be going on. And it's happened several times where it's like, it comes up and you're just, I'm sorry, but you're not allowed to know that. You're just going to have to play this out as it goes. And I know the first few times that happened to me, it felt like a void, and it felt like I was missing something. But I came to realize as I went on and as I talked to other readers and other practitioners, that's not a failing. It's something that is. I think that's just a few of the things that people can look out for. And also a good dose of humility never hurt anybody either. Whenever you're a reader, I know a lot of people, just think it's the world and can jump into some interesting pitfalls there. But you're not necessarily the mouth of God. What you say doesn't mean it's set in stone. Keeping a good dose of humility and always improving your skills, no matter what. I don't care what level of tarot you're at. There's something that can always be improved upon. So, you got to sit, you got to practice, you got to take your time. Take your time. This isn't a skill that happens overnight. It's going to take time to build relationships with the cards, the spirits, and all the forces that act therein. Again, learning the symbolism, that's just the beginning part of it. It's all the rest of it that's going to take a lot of time to really get in there and get gelled as time goes on.
If there's a listener out there who's thinking, oh, that sounds great, I'll just learn everything possibly ever about the tarot and then I'll start. Can you kind of give him or her some advice about maybe that might not be the best use of their time?
Well, getting the ideas down and practicing the correspondences is great. But, like everyone else has said, the real meat is in the doing of it. There's nothing like doing a reading and having to search your brain. Okay, this is this, this is this, this is this. And, if you're just sitting there constantly reading a book or just memorizing correspondences, that's great and all, but how ingrained is that really? You have to use these skills. You have to hone them. And there is really no better way than to just start practicing. And it comes over time. Even in the beginning, if you can't remember off the top of your head and you have to go and consult a book or you have to go and consult a reference sheet, there is no shame in that. It takes time to get all of that into your brain. And rushing that process, I don't think it's really beneficial for anyone. Slow and steady. Get the practice. Read for yourself, read for your friends, read for your family, and just get it going and get those things moving in your brain. I keep going back to the idea of by names and images are all these powers awakened. Whenever you're looking at these cards and you're having to read for someone else and having to see how these things fit together. You can learn the correspondences of each of these cards, but it isn't until you start doing readings and then you start practicing till you see how they actually interrelate and meld in real world application. Even if you don't know all the correspondences, even if you don't know all the meanings, just start throwing cards little by little. And if you have to consult books, if you have to consult references, that's fine, because little by little it's getting put in there. I didn't know all the correspondences off the top of my head either, but I was encouraged to just go do it because it is, I wouldn't say the easiest way, but probably the best way to get them really ingrained.
Why don't we talk a little bit about Keeper of the Keys? I think a lot of people would be very interested in your own tarot classes that are offered digitally and how people can sign up and get more information. Can you just tell us a little bit about Keeper of the Keys and how this got started and just how people can find out more information?
Well, Keeper of the Keys is kind of my portion, the tarot portion of Doc Solomon's. It's all kind of run from the same page. Keeper of the Keys does have its own Facebook page. I actually, kind of going back to the previous question to answer this one too, I was encouraged by Chick Cicero to, get out and start reading and just go out and do it. So I did, and as things moved on, I read in a local shop here once a week. And, as things have been moving on, we've been encouraged to do, more and more things online. And again, that idea of just do it. Teaching classes, those kinds of things. And Keeper of the Keys is my tarot portion. And I offer online readings through Skype or phone readings, various formats, WebEx. But I also offer tarot courses. My beginner class is 8 weeks long. The first class is all about the history of the tarot. It's an hour and a half lecture of where it came from, how it evolved, how it moved through Europe, far more detailed than the kind of the synopsis I gave at the beginning there. Each one of the following classes, we go suit by suit. Wands. What is the element of the wands? What letter it belongs to with Yod, He, Vav, He, how it's placed on, and we work suit by suit. And then I take the major arcana and break it down into 2 weeks because it takes a long time to get through each of the symbolism of the major arcana. But we go over all of it, all the symbology, all the correspondences, all of it. And of course, the meanings of the cards. And a lot of times I'll give examples of how they may interrelate to the other cards that are around them. Then the last class is kind of a preview of what the intermediate course will be. And so I do intermediate and advanced, which I'm still trying to figure out how to move those online. The beginner course is great to get started with. It teaches you, pretty much everything you need to know to really get started and to really start being able to read thoroughly and accurately for yourself and your friends. Mm-hmm. And all that wonderful mystical symbolism too.
Doc Solomon's, Carrie, can you just talk about Doc Solomon's Occult Curios? And obviously, as you mentioned, the tarot part is a part of Doc Solomon's, but also for those listeners who are interested in either grimoire items, consecrated items, items that can be blessed via special mass. I mean, can you just tell us a little bit about Doc Solomon's? It sounds like it's really grown a lot in the last year.
Oh, yes. Yes, it has. And it's a wonderful thing to see. Yeah, Doc Solomon's Occult Curios, we started about 3 years ago. I'm sure a lot of people know that Aaron and I also do a lot of Solomonic magic. We kind of started this because there wasn't a lot of availability for a lot of these specialty tools. Just being able to find the hazel wands that we've had available was ridiculously hard for the longest time. And, just being able to make these things a little more available and being able to use our specific skill set to help others. And, we carry all kinds of things from incenses to Solomonic beeswax candles. Those are very special items that all three of us have a hand in. Aaron will pour the candles. Our daughter AJ spins the cotton wicks for them. And then I take them and engrave them. And then they're consecrated and blessed and sent out. So we're making all kinds of Solomonic tools, talismans. I love being able to do talismans on true parchment. We also have available talismans on metal through another artist, Eli Cohen. And we have so much that's available through our various partners, Anubian oils, all kinds of things. And we also take lots of commissions, magic circles, talismans. We do prayers, candle lightings, blessings, you name it. It's kind of it's becoming a full service Solomonic mystical shop and services. It's just been incredible to see, whenever we first started this, we had for many, many years wanted to start some kind of shop, to do something like that. And, we were always told that, pagans or magicians don't have money. So, just don't even bother. Nobody will buy anything. And, we finally got started, and it's been absolutely incredible to see the response and how this is growing over time. It's incredible to be able to do something that you love all the time. And between my work with the tarot and our work with Doc Solomon's and everything, it has just been an absolutely incredible experience to see how this has grown and how the community has supported this business and our family. And I can't even begin to tell you how grateful I am for all of it and being able to serve people in this spiritual format, being able to do prayers for people and evocations and talking to angels for people that might not be able to have access to that otherwise.
Do you have altars for each of the like individual altars for each of the 7 archangels of the and their associates for the week?
We have all but Gabriel. We have 6 out of the 7.
Ah, it was Gabriel. Okay.
Yep, and he will be coming in shortly. And it's funny how this has built over the last year and a half. One of my patron saints and Aaron's as well has always been Michael. It kind of started with a statue of him, this whole building altars thing that has come. And, we've had altars to various deities and, spirits that we work with and what have you, but having the 7 planetary archangels here is just, it's incredible to see the work that they've done. Again, not only for other people, but for us, and how much things have changed since at least the 6 of them have been here. And to really get to know them in a far more personal way. The experience that I've had with Anael, she came in, I think it was August or September that we ended up setting up her altar. In fact, I ended up setting up her altar in kind of a surprise for myself. And she, unbeknownst to me, after I had set up this altar, she had kind of been with me through most of my life. And it's funny to see how whenever this altar came, it just kind of became mine. And now I work with her on usually at least a daily basis, and sometimes in the morning and the evening. It's just incredible to have these guys here and see how much work they've done and how beneficial they've been to our lives. And we also look at it as kind of a symbiotic relationship, because as they work for us, we're spreading their names, and other people are learning who they are and receiving their blessings, and their names are going out to the ends of the earth. So it's really a symbiotic relationship. Unless you do this kind of thing, it's kind of hard to fathom. At least it was for me until this really kicked in. So I love having them here. Yeah. It's a lot of work, but I absolutely love having them here.
Can you let the listeners know, Carrie, about where can people find more information about yourself, about Keeper of the Keys, about Doc Solomon's? Can you just point people in the right direction?
We have our website. It is docsolomons.com. It's real easy. And Keeper of the Keys is on there. All of our products are on there. All of our classes. There's also the Doc Solomon's Occult Curios Facebook page. There's Keeper of the Keys Facebook page as well. Either one of those we can be contacted through for tarot readings or anything magical. And that's our web presence. I do readings once a week at a local shop called Mystical Sense, and they're on Wednesdays 12 to 6. So we also do live classes there as well. And a schedule should be coming up probably within the next couple of weeks. And I teach tarot there. We teach ceremonial magic, and we're also going to be doing a round of Solomonic classes there too. So if you're in the area, you can head over to Notice Asa to take some live classes with us. We also attend several festivals throughout the year around. The next one coming up, I believe Aaron's headlining at, will be Florida Pagan Gathering. That'll be taking place the end of April in St. Pete. So there's lots of places to find us. We're always online. We always look forward to hearing from students and other seekers and mystical folks alike.
Carrie, I know in 2018 and this year, we were talking a little bit before the interview about there's just so many things that are coming up. Is there anything in 2018 that comes to mind that you just want to let the listeners know about, just to kind of keep an eye out for with Doc Solomon's or with your work?
We will be adding a lot more videos this year of various kinds. I hope to be adding some more of my walks around, showing off some of the local spirits and flora and fauna that grow in the area. I think Aaron's thinking about adding a few more classes as well, workshop type things. And then of course I'm going to be doing some kind of art-based classes as well. But this is looking to be a big year for Doc Solomon's. So definitely keep an eye out, and if people have suggestions for classes, ideas that they're looking at, we're open to new ideas and new suggestions, so do let us know.
That is fantastic. Fantastic, Carrie. I guess the last question I have, and I know listeners, when I would mention to people that I was having the privilege of interviewing you, people would say, one person said, ask Carrie, how is it to live with Aaron Leitch? Just how is that? And you mentioned that you and Aaron are, quote, two halves of the same card. So I'll just say, you're a powerhouse. He's a powerhouse. We got, divination, ceremonial magic. How is it having this kind of, this kind of magical power couple? How is that for you?
Well, I guess since I live it, it's kind of like a fish in water. But, all I can say is I am so incredibly grateful for my life right now. Whenever we first got together, we were just literally a couple of kids. And we always kind of joke about how we were sitting there a few months after we had gotten together, and we didn't even have enough money to buy a candy bar. We were sitting out in front of a 7-Eleven. And to see the way that we've been able to work together, how our lives have intertwined, and what we've been able to build over the last 23 years. It is incredible, and I am incredibly lucky to have been able to do this, and that so early in my life I seem to have found someone that, really was kind of the second half, my pair. So I guess it's a fish in water, but I absolutely love my life. I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Well, that is very, very good advice, and just a very good experience, and awesome about all those listeners out there who are, either work with someone like that or have a partner. That's just a reminder for all of the just awesome, literally awesome magic in the world. And Carrie Leitch, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. We really, really appreciate that, and hope to have you back on again soon.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed it, and I hope everyone gets something out of it, because I absolutely love the tarot. I love magic, and I love being able to share the things that I've been able to learn over the last 25 years. So thank you. I appreciate it.
And thank you for listening to this episode of the Glitch Bottle Podcast and helping us uncork the uncommon this fine day or night, or wherever you happen to occupy space-time in your occult lairs, your summoning towers, or your cloistered libraries of the esoterically awesome. You can check out previous episodes and other magical Glitch Bottle news on YouTube, youtube.com/glitchbottle, and subscribe and download free episodes anytime on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and on Spreaker.com. Just search Glitch Bottle and enjoy. Also, please make sure to subscribe and follow us on Twitter at Glitch Bottle, all one word. Our intro music is the track Tornado by David Zeste. Our magical interest is fueled by sincerity, passion, amazing guests, and a copious amount of clinking coffee cups. Until next time, this is Alexander Eth reminding you to invoke often, uncork the uncommon, and keep the light.